Hey everyone, and welcome to another Konoa Reviews, where we review games both new and old on all platforms. If you like the content that I make, then please subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you'll never miss a review when it comes out. Today we talk about Yakuza Kiwami, the remake of the very first Yakuza game that came out on the PlayStation 2. If you've seen my review of Yakuza 0, you know that I actually did play the original close to when it came out. Therefore, the first Yakuza game will always have a special place to me amongst the many Yakuza entries in the series. It is the one that introduced me to awesome characters like Kiryu and Nishiki, and to the crazy shenanigans of Goro Majima, and to the awesome dark story that is told in the streets of Kamurocho, the district clearly inspired by Tokyo's Shinjuku. A good friend of mine actually lent me Yakuza Kiwami 1 and 2 to play it during the lockdown. I'm very thankful for the kind gesture, and these games of course are very lengthy and in that regard are perfect to play during those cold days inside. The story of Yakuza Kiwami tells the story of Kiryu Kazuma, a Yakuza who got involved with a big incident that leaves the head of a Yakuza family dead, and he takes the blame for it to protect his best friend. After spending years in jail, he leaves the Yakuza life behind, but cannot unfortunately shake his past since the Yakuza families have been in an uproar, with Kiryu's former friend Nishiki making a sudden rise to power and a huge sum of money of the Yakuza clan having disappeared. All of the cutscenes and dialogue have been redone for Kiwami, and they look more beautiful than ever. They are still lengthy, over-the-top dramatic, and absolutely fantastic. I am also really glad that there is much more consistency between the cutscenes, since Kiwami does not have those annoying still images with dialogue like in Yakuza 0, which simply felt cheap and amateurish. It's even also the case that in the non-pre-rendered cutscenes, the animations and facial expressions are a bit better compared to 0 as well. After the head of the Yakuza clan is suddenly assassinated, things escalate and a turf war begins with various clans looking for the stolen money and hoping to make a power move. Kiryu gets wound up in this, and eventually meets a little girl named Haruka, who seemingly is related to Kiryu's childhood crush Mizuki, who also has suddenly disappeared. Along the way, Kiryu meets all kinds of strange and interesting characters like the washed-out cop Date-san, or the Lord of the Underworld who keeps an eye on everything going on around the city through an intricate system of cameras. Once again, the storytelling is excellent, and I would even say that the pacing of the game is perfect for the first 3 to 4 chapters. Except this weird little new intro that they made for the game, where you're going after a ring as a birthday present, which has you just run all over the place, which is annoying. It isn't until the chapter where you have to look out for the daughter of Date-san that the story takes a bit of a dip, but luckily there isn't too much filler in the game compared to others in the series. The story isn't afraid to suddenly kill characters you love in pretty horrific or sad ways, and it means you are always on the edge of your seat who is going to make it through. I also have to say that I do like this more serious approach of the game a bit more compared to what Yakuza is known for today. The silly and weird side quests were such a success with the fans that many of the later Yakuza games got crazier and more outrageous side quests. And though I thought they were funny too, I did think they were such a weird and stark contrast to the dark series' main storytelling that I now see I do indeed prefer it more serious like in this game. It just fits the tone overall a bit better. The gameplay of Yakuza can be compared to something like Shenmue, where you walk through the streets of the city and can do a mixture of talking to people to progress the story or fight enemies in a beat-em-up style brawler. The fighting style is comparable to that of Yakuza 0, with Kiryu being able to switch between different stances, though they added one new stance in this game which mimics the fighting style of the PlayStation 2 game, and have added Kiwami powers, which are similar to finishers or power moves that do a ton of damage against a stunned enemy. When the enemy is stunned, they will glow a certain color associated with the stance, and so it's up to you to change to that stance and perform the finishing move. If you do not manage to do this in time, the enemy will heal a large amount of HP. With almost every Yakuza game, the fun thing too is that how the experience works is very different. In Yakuza 0, you earned money from doing side quests and defeating enemies, and you use that money for everything like buying items or even leveling up. In Yakuza Kiwami, you simply earn experience shown in a bar, and once the bar is full, you get 1 experience point, which you can then spend in various skill trees to up your skills like increase your HP, unlock new attacks, etc. In Yakuza Kiwami 2, the experience system is again very different, so I do like how they change it up every time to keep things fresh. The battles feel nice as ever, with punches feeling very visceral, though a bit arcadey, and of course the highlight are the many different finishing moves you can do with items laying around. Crushing someone with a bicycle or using a flagpole as a baseball bat never gets old. One cruel finisher I like in particular is the one where Kiryu takes a pot of hot water and pours it over the poor Sob's face, basically scarring him for life. Such a pure guy, that Kiryu. I will also say that Yakuza Kiwami is way more difficult compared to Yakuza 0, but this is a good thing. Enemies will block way more and often dodge, and many of the fights, especially the boss fights, are really challenging and demand you move around the battlefield and dodge or block as well yourself. Over the years, so many Yakuza iterations have come out, including ones for the PS Vita, one with a zombie setting, one that's set in the Fist of the North Star world, etc. And with each new game, they added more silly side missions and more silly minigames to where the games became really packed and chock full of content. Which in a way is indeed very cool because you definitely get your bang for your buck. But there's still something pure about this first game that did not have all those weird things in it, and was genuinely about a mature told story with some side quests here and there, of which some could still be a bit quirky, and a handful of minigames like baseball, casino roulette, or karaoke. This remake, Kiwami, of course was made with the same engine that was used for Yakuza 3, and since by then many other minigame types had been added, they made sure to add a lot of these into this game as well. This means that though the main story and side quests are all still the same, the amount of minigames you can do have been increased, but not to the ludicrous amounts as in other games like Yakuza 0. This also means that Yakuza Kiwami is significantly shorter than a game like Yakuza 0, in which you can easily pump 50 to 60 hours, whereas you will go through the main story in Yakuza Kiwami in an hour or 12, and for completionists, it will only be around 20 or so hours to do most of what the game has to offer. Now, I still think that 20 hours is more than enough for a game to warrant its sale price, and it should also be said that not every game in the series needs to be 60 plus hours to get through, which has, for example, become the common thing with something like Assassin's Creed, and it's all the worse for it, because it just takes forever to complete each iteration. The side quests themselves might be a bit less memorable because they are not that silly, but they're still quite charming. In one quest, Kiryu almost gets duped by a woman with a well-endowed chest, and in another quest, Kiryu keeps running into these street thugs that try to pretend like Kiryu made them trip and demand money for compensation. There are fewer side quests compared to Yakuza 0, and so the pacing is good in that you can easily do 5 to 6 of these side quests each chapter and still keep track of what is happening with the main story. Even with the minigames, they did not go that crazy, but definitely did add a few more. They added pool and darts, they added the mini go-karts, though this time they did not add such a massive questline with it. Instead, the massive questline this time is added to a new minigame that involves wrestling matches of girls in skimpy bikinis that have elements of bugs weaved into their skimpy clothing. Yeah, it's again very weird and very Japanese in that way. The thing with bugs is actually something very popular with many children there, and even some adults, though way in a lesser extent. When I lived in Tokyo, I talked to so many of my friends, and even my female friends talked about how they did like bugs and went out and caught them during school trips with a net, whereas now they absolutely are terrified of bugs. It also doesn't help that bugs in Japan can be very big, so this mixed with the pervy nature of the semi-nude wrestling matches might explain some things. This minigame is actually a reskin of the catfights from Yakuza 0, though it feels just a bit less random than in its prequel. What is a bit of a letdown though, is that it's clear they just reused animations and models of the previous game, and thereby create the impression that they did not put really all that much effort into it. And that's unfortunately the only real issue that I have with this game, which I otherwise absolutely adore, is that so much is just reused from Yakuza 0 and possibly even other earlier Yakuza games with the same engine. Fighting moves have the exact same animations, character models are the exact same, minigames just are reused skins, and in a way it almost feels like a Dynasty Warriors game when it comes to how little effort sometimes has been put into making it feel new. Now the minigames themselves and the fighting are still a ton of fun, don't get me wrong, but it does make the impression that I've played most of this already, and the coat of new paint is simply too thin to not make it feel new and refreshing. It is another reason why I'm really scared that fatigue might rise up when playing this series since so many of the games are so similar. Yakuza Kiwami 2 is also on that same engine, so will that also have the catfight minigames or go-kart game with only a slight altered look, but other than that, the same animations and models? I do think that one foundation of a new minigame has been laid, that this can be put into sequels in the game series as well, but I do expect a bit of effort to make it feel at least slightly different from the minigame equivalent in the previous games. Besides the main story, side quests, and minigames, there's also a new system introduced, which is the Majima system. Randomly throughout the city, you will run into Goro Majima, who will then challenge you to a duel. If you beat him enough times, you will then have to face him in a boss fight style match, and some of these encounters can be very funny but also very silly. Having Majima hide in a street traffic cone or having him suddenly appear as a zombie are some of the encounters you will have with him. This system does actually have a function, since by defeating him, you will unlock skills from one particular skill tree on which you cannot use regular experience points. All in all, I think Yakuza Kiwami is again a very solid and awesome iteration in the series. When it comes to storytelling, it is better than Yakuza 0, and the overall serious tone is also more to my liking. There's still enough side content to experience, though the only critique I have is that some of the content here feels reused instead of rehashed. For the longest time, I thought that Yakuza 1 would be my favorite in the series, but I was so impressed by Yakuza 0's scope, gameplay, and just all the different quests and minigames that you could do, that I do have to say that by now, Yakuza 0 has become my favorite in the series. Yet it doesn't mean that Yakuza Kiwami or the first Yakuza are bad. As I said, they will always have a special place for me personally, and I still think they are fantastic games that improve even upon some things of Yakuza 0, and are well worth your money. Yakuza Kiwami, in the end, gets an 8.5. After now having played Yakuza 0 and Yakuza Kiwami, of course the next step would be to play Yakuza Kiwami 2. I've also played the original way back when, and I'm excited to now head to Osaka to continue the game's epic story. I do hope that fatigue won't set in further, like it did with some aspects of Kiwami 1, but only time will tell.